I don't know exactly why this is a subject has always interested me. Maybe I do, and it's just in the back of my head. I'm not sure. But it all started when I was in junior high, actually in the 9th grade, because it was junior high in our school. And we became interested in flying, a whole bunch of us. Don't have any idea why. We had no airplanes around there. The airport was about that long. And it was out over the water. But that's what kids that age do. Then I got into high school. It started in the 10th grade. And it's like, I can't remember exactly, but it was either late October or early November. And our high school sat up on a high hill. And it was 3 stories high. And I was in an English class. I remember that. Don't ask me why. But all of a sudden, we looked out this window out over the Columbia River, and here comes this big flying boat in to land. It taxis up around the corner up there to what was then the brand new Tongue Point Naval Air Station, or Naval Station, I should say. And the next morning, I'm in that same class, looking out that same window, and here comes that Boeing 314 taking off down the river with a couple of Coast Guard pickup boats chasing it. I never forgot that sight. In my mind, maybe not the best airplane that ever flew, but perhaps the prettiest airplane that ever flew. And I've never forgotten it. And one day it dawned on me when we were talking about, why not resurrect something that is completely lost in the pages of history? Partly because of the timing and partly because of everything else. So what I thought I would like to do is to introduce you a little bit in, not that I ever had anything to do with Pan Am. I did for a brief, about 3 days, when I had a job with them until CAA, which was now FAA. CAA disapproved their new routes, and so I lost my job, and it turned out that I went back in service anyway. So, but at any rate, I thought maybe I'd introduce you to some of these things and show you the benefit of those people who've never seen it, what it was like in those days. And I'm going to point out some things that I'm going to point them out just in case anybody happens to miss it. So these are the glory days of the Pan Am Clipper. We're now back in the late 1930s. Well, let's go back a little bit further than that and start about what brought this all on. There's one of the early float planes. It's not a flying boat as we refer to them, of course. But it was obvious at that time, back in the 30s, that we did not have land-based aircraft that could traverse the Atlantic or the Pacific. So if we wanted to go somewhere into another continent, we had to go by boat. And the Navy began to work on some of this stuff, and it carried over into civilian lives. And this is just an early shot of one of the little float planes that, of course, didn't have anywhere near that much range, but it was a forerunner. And everything starts early. And those of you who are as old as I am, and I doubt that that's the case here, remember that we didn't always have automatic transmissions and backup lights and those things. We were lucky to have any lights at all on the car. We were lucky if it ran. So everything started, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later on. Where do we go? There we go. And this is a picture of the Boeing 314 Clipper, as we saw it. Now, where is that picture taken? I have no idea. It might have been taken even up there, but I don't think so. And that's the airplane that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about today. Beautiful, beautiful airplane. And as I said, in my opinion, maybe the prettiest airplane ever built. And this is where, and again, I can't identify where, but I think that probably is in Hawaii. Most of these things that I've drug up here are pictures that I've been able to pick up from different places. They're unidentified, but I would like you to take a quick look at those people that are walking up the gangplank there and see if you notice anything different about the way that they're dressed compared to us. Or even more so compared with the guys you see, the people you see getting on and off the airlines today. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But this is the route that they ended up flying. And I put this in early in the slide selection, earlier than it really belongs, because I wanted to show you what it was that they were aiming for. And look at are any of those names familiar? They are to me, I'll tell you that. The only one I never landed at Canton. Close one time, but never did. And again, Pan Am set the place. They set up all of these islands, particularly Midway, Wake, Guam, and in the Philippines originally. And it was from those that we, and perhaps that's why the Japanese were so interested in taking those back. Not only did it give them control of the Pacific, but it also deprived us of any control of the Pacific. Very vital places, particularly in World War II, and used later on in almost everything else. And that was the route that basically we're talking about. Not entirely, and we'll talk about that in a little bit too. But maybe I'll go back and we'll talk about that right now. In researching some of this stuff, I found that no two sources of any kind would agree on anything as to exactly which airplanes went into service, when, where, whatever happened to them, or anything else. I thought I knew this stuff, and then I started researching, and I found out, yeah, I knew a lot of incorrect stuff. Because, or at least it might be correct, who knows? Because all of this stuff did get lost in the pages of history because this was immediately before Pearl Harbor. And much of this stuff was taken into account then and lost in the pages of our history. And that's a shame, because I'm sure some of it is tremendously interesting. What happened to these airplanes? We do know what happened to a couple of them that got shot up at various places. We do know also that one of them finally did get back to the U.S. Took them a long time, and they flew around the world to do it. But those parts we know, everything else is in disagreement. So I thought I'd throw you some pictures of the 314 Clipper, and you can get an idea what it was like. Now, some of these pictures are not very good, but they're the best that's available. This is the crew compartment. It looks just exactly like crew compartment of every airplane I ever flew. But, you know, notice a couple other things. Look at the radios. Holy cow. You got that in the cell phone now. This is the pilot's instrument panel, and I keep wondering where the rest of it went. But take a look, for those of you who have flown in any large aircraft recently in the pilot's compartment, and I'm sure there are quite a few of you that have, and notice the flight instruments. Needle, ball, airspeed. Period. And you say, where's the rest of it? That's all you did. To fly instruments in one of those, did we ever do that? Yes. A lot of us did that very early in World War II. But they rapidly changed that. Because, why? Because it was dangerous. You pointed in that direction and hoped it was the right way. But there's always a beginning to everything. This is part of their engine control panel. and not just the engine, but your flaps and all the rest of that stuff there, and the engineer's compartment, so to speak. And of course there are 4 of everything, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And there's what it looked like. So now let me take a little bit of time and tell you about the airplane itself. First of all, the wings and the, well, mostly the wing compartments and some of the other, and the engines and whatnot, were taken by Boeing off of the failed B-15, which was superseded by the B-17, which we all know so much about and is so widely publicized. The B-15 had a lot of problems and never really made it for good reason. For one, it was terribly, terribly underpowered. Now, when they built the B-314, this is something I was wrong about, and I found out as I researched it, and I know it's right now, were R-20, the right R-2600 engines, which those of you who may have flown B-25s and A-20s and aircraft like that, that's the engines that we had in those. Excuse me. Very good engine with one weakness. They required quite a bit of maintenance to be running well. Once they did, they were a very good engine, and but through the years they were responsible for a lot of feathered props too. So, but at any rate, that's the engines that were put into the 314, and they worked quite well for them. And from here you can see this is kind of a diagram, a drawing more or less, to show you where the compartments were in that aircraft. A huge aircraft, excuse me, as far as the depth is concerned, and the width. And another interesting factor about the 314 was that the wings were so thick that the flight engineer could crawl out into the wings and actually service the engines to some extent, of course, in flight. And that's kind of hard to imagine, but it was true. And we'll show you some more things about this beautiful airplane. There's a color slide, a drawing that shows you up close how the passengers would be in there. It carried a crew of 10, and theoretically, and I have no reason to dispute this, 74 passengers maximum. The price for that, as you might imagine, was a little bit higher than I'd be willing to pay. Exorbitant price of like $12,000 in today's money. But it was strictly for the super rich. And from all I've read, they didn't have any trouble filling the airplane. So that was and this is back in, we're still in the Depression days now. And this is a good color shot, supposedly real, of the flight deck, showing you all of these different stations as a group. And look at the size of that thing. Mammoth. But it's very broad, very deep, which of course cut down on its cruising speed and increased the cost. But at that point, that seemed not to be any great concern. And we can understand that because we're now progressing. What we're doing is replacing the cruise ships that we see today and that sort of thing. So, in other words, progress is beginning to take its toll. And this is a live shot. Now, doesn't that look just exactly like the airlines are flying today? The food's the same, too. It really is amazing, you know. All of the galley was stocked by food from some of the very finest restaurants available at any place. They were catered to these aircraft, and I'm not sure exactly how they reheated all that, but they did. But that is a live shot, and it really is pretty. You look at how the people are dressed there, and they're sitting at tables with linen on there and all. Amazing. It looks more like it's on a cruise ship than in an aircraft. But they're very interesting aircraft. This is a picture of one of them taking off. Now, where was that? I have some thoughts that may have actually been taken in Estonia. Because I've looked at that photo and tried to study it, and part of it looks like the same background, but I wouldn't bet on it either. But it does give you an idea of the size of that beautiful airplane. It'd be like, for me, like flying half of the world all at one time. I don't know, it's a mammoth thing. Cruising speed was about 140 miles per hour, as I remember. And it had sufficient range only to make those stops going on the Pacific. Now, there's not too much available on the 314 on the Atlantic because it flew very little there. Almost everything was Pacific. It was going to, but it never got that far. But there it is, and you can tell that's the Golden Gate Bridge. It's not a very good picture, but it's a picture. And taking off for it. Now, at this point here, I'd like to get a little better picture here. Go back to the beginning part of my story and talk about why we saw these aircraft where we did up there in the Columbia River. And I never stopped to realize it until one day somebody turned the light on. Pan Am was taking possession of the count that I had, but 7 of them, 2 at a time in 2 bunches, and then the other 3 I think were singles. And I don't know which one it was that we saw. We thought it was the first one, but it wasn't. So we don't know. In researching, it appears to me that it might have been the 3rd one. At any rate, the reason they did that, they're made in Washington. They're going to be flying out of California, both of which have sales tax. Oregon doesn't have and never has had a sales tax. So therefore, by flying them down there and docking them in Oregon, buying them there, and then flying them down, they avoided the sales tax, which, as you imagine, was quite a... It was years before I found that out and confirmed. I wondered about that, and then, well, that's true. So anyway, that's how they make money, you know. You got to be smarter than the guy who ever taken it away from you. So anyway, beautiful old airplane, which did marvels for us as far as the eyes of the world on American ingenuity, engineering, and whatever else you want to include there. Yes?
What did that puppy weigh, roughly?
Just a minute. I have that here, and I'll tell you. Or do it ahead. No. That's on my clipboard back there. Just a minute. Let me go get it, because I do have it. I don't normally deal that much in those kinds of things for a simple reason that most people aren't interested in that. But since you asked the question, then I'll do what I can to answer it. Okay. The cost, first of all, I'll read a few of these statistics to you. The cost in today's dollars, in their dollars, was $620,000, which rounds out to be almost exactly $10 million today. There were 12 built, all told, and 400,000, no, that's wrong, okay. 5,200 miles, 84,000 pounds, oh, this is an interesting thing I meant to mention and I forgot. FDR and Churchill flew the Atlantic to their Casablanca summit in the 314, and while he was in the air, he celebrated his birthday. Doesn't say which one. Yeah, but I thought that was kind of interesting. So, okay, 84,000 pounds. Yeah, that's what it weighed. And 5,200 miles, and by today's standards, very slow, but by those standards back in those days, that wasn't all that bad. 185 miles an hour cruise, just under 200 miles an hour. And so it was a marvel and a big step forward that didn't last very long. And progress-wise, that may have been a good thing, but in other ways it was, in any other way it was not. Beautiful airplane. And there's one sitting, and that too, if you look in the background, it almost has to be San Francisco. And you look back there and you can see the Pier 39 and whatnot. But what a marvel. Now, let me go back here just a little bit more. Boeing, in the early days, built fighters, and I have to truthfully say that when I look back on my own life, it was Boeing aircraft that really got me interested in flying. But it was a fighter, the P-26, open cockpit, in a screenly drive might get up as high as 130 miles an hour, you know, but a beautiful airplane nonetheless. And when you're a little kid, it doesn't take much. Even electric train turns me on, even today. So, at any rate, Boeing, of course, as we all know, went into started into the airline business, and then, of course, when Pearl Harbor was, well, actually a little bit before that, when it was obvious what was going to happen, started building military aircraft, and specifically 4-engine and better. And but they really stopped production of the 314s and whatnot immediately after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And whereas they had still been working on it to some extent and doing both parts of their work. As we know, the dispute, they say there are 12 of them built, but I didn't find anything else that agreed with that. As I said, I found nothing but disagreement in every source of these airplanes. The best information I have is that there were 7 built, or at least 7 that were gone when Pearl Harbor, either in the air or somewhere else, when Pearl Harbor was bombed. One of them was caught coming in to Hawaii in the air, and they were forewarned by radio, and they turned around and sat down out at sea way to the west so they wouldn't get shot down. Another one did get shot full of holes, made it back home all right. The one that most interesting, and I do not know which one of these it was, there's no specification on numbers or anything, but one of them got caught in the Hong Kong area when the Japanese, when we first declared war right after Pearl Harbor, and they ended up flying all the way around the world and coming back in and finally ending up in New York Harbor after several months of trying to scrounge gas and whatever they could get from any place they could get it. But they did make it home. And that is a marvelous feat in itself. There's no explanation of where they got the money to get the gas, or in a lot of cases where they actually got it. But in the little islands, anything they could get that they would plan and fly to that destination and refuel. And it took them a long, long time. But they finally did get that airplane back home. Whatever happened to that one remaining one, no one seems to know. It's, and that's a shame. What a marvelous thing that would be in an air museum today. One of the real historic items in our country. So, while I never had any desire to what did I do? I'll just have to yell, I guess. I can do that. There we go. Thank you. I hate working with machines that are smarter than I am. And at any rate, one of our very short segments of even aviation history, and yet a fascinating thing, because we don't know the answers to a lot of these. We can research it, and as I said, on several different things, I would research 10 and 12 different places, and not any two of them would agree on what really occurred here. Mostly because all of that was lost in the hubbub of war. And those of you who are old enough, and most of us are, to remember what it was like when World War II first broke out. And that was the most organized bedlam and chaos that I've ever gone through in my life. And some of these things that happened to Boeing from then on out are worth volumes of history in themselves. Because, well, I did fly a lot of Boeing stuff, and and they were never my favorite because I didn't think they were very exciting. And after all, what good is flying if it's not exciting? You know, and especially when you're 19 years old. But at any rate, there was more carried on here beyond the 314 Clipper, and I think this is an interesting thing for those of you who are or ever have been followers of Howard Hughes. I think I've just described him as being a character, almost fictional type person. He was a great believer in rules and regulations for other people. But he followed this, and he saw this, and at the time he did this, was started in on this, and Henry Kaiser, incidentally, was working with him for a while till they had some kind of a political fallout. But it appeared at that time as though these flying clippers were the transportation, transatlantic and transpacific. So he was, why build one with 4 engines when I could build one with 8? You know, Howard Hughes type of thinking. And it was a very interesting thing. This one had specs like you just simply cannot believe. Oh, I forgot to tell you. No, I'll go back and talk about that. 219 feet long, wingspan 320 feet, and it 400,000 pounds. And he had, in those days, and still to some extent today, but much more so in those days, the CAA, which is now the FAA, had restrictions on your test flights and whatnot for a new aircraft. And one of those is you had to have a high-speed taxi test. Well, how do you do that in the water? The same way you do it on land. So he went out and did his high-speed taxi test out in the San Francisco Bay. and whoops, it flew. I didn't mean it to fly. You know? And what you see there is a picture of the only time that airplane ever flew. And at that height, right there. They landed, and the next thing you knew, before very long, that thing was docked by the Queen Mary, and it was there for years and years and years, so, on display. And I couldn't resist that one time when we were down there. I had to go through the Queen Mary and the Spruce Goose. It picked up that nickname in spite of the fact that it was not spruce at all. It was laminated birch, right? Laminated birch, and but it was one of a beautiful airplane. And that particular airplane, for those of you who are unaware of this, is still on display at the Evergreen Air Museum in McMinnville, Oregon. And some of us have gone, I went through it for a second time up there many, many years after it was done in Long Beach. And, but that's kind of historic there, and someone had the advantage of taking a picture of the one and only flight of the H-4 Hercules, they called it. It was mammoth. There's partly what it looked like. Much of the stuff you'll see in there, you take a look at the control columns and whatnot, very, very similar to what we found in those days in any of the large aircraft. They were pretty much standard. There is the engineer's nightmare. 8 of everything. Man, we had to do 6 of everything, and that was about 5 times too many. But it took and my guess is, from the looks of that, is that may very well have been taken up there at Evergreen. It evolved out of these marvelous things that certain seagoing aircraft were going to be of some value in World War II, and some of them even today to a minor extent. Because there is an advantage. What we see right here is an old Martin bomber with dropping depth charges. Supposedly that's a real action shot. I can't verify that it is, but that's what it says. Very valuable during World War II in different capacities, and we'll spend just a couple of minutes talking about some of those. This is one of my favorites to talk about, even though it's not a flying boat. We had one of those down at the Air Museum for a long time, because it has a history that few people are even able to acknowledge. It was, I'm trying to remember the bay where there were some aircraft shot down, some of ours. And one of these OS-2Us flew in there to rescue them. There were so many people that they couldn't get it off the water. So they put them all over the wings, everywhere, where they were up out of the water, and taxied to the nearest naval vessel, which was something like 25 miles away, and saved every one of them. If that isn't a story worth telling, what is? And I just had to get that lick in there, even though it didn't belong there. And this, of course, is the hero, particularly the Pacific, and the guys that were in the Atlantic would probably disagree with that right there. Is there anyone who ever flew anywhere in the Pacific, particularly during World War II and Korea, who didn't have at least one friend who came home because of these guys right here? We tried to throw a party for some of them after they pulled out some of ours. but they would have none of it. That's my job. PBY, they're still flying, and we have one. Last I looked, still done. I haven't been out in the museum we still have it going. I haven't been down there for about 3 months now because we were going, but marvelous, marvelous airplane that did almost everything. I'll tell you a personal story that has nothing to do with the Boeing 314, but it does have to do with this. Right after Pearl Harbor was bombed, I was a senior in high school. It was the week after our final football game of the season. And it was a few days later, and I don't remember exactly where, but I do remember that it was a Sunday because I lived up near that school that I talked about. And a Japanese submarine, I didn't know what it was, so it came up the river. Not that far, it's about 6.5 miles, as there is from the mouth of the river there. And all of a sudden turned around, and how he ever navigated out of there submerged, I'll never know. But he disappeared out of there, and of course we couldn't see the periscope or anything that far away. Next thing I know, out of some point, here comes one of those things, and the story is that he waited till he got out of the mouth of the river, and then they got a whole ton of depth charges on it, and we never heard any more from either one. So these, I've always said that, we have all of these glamour aircraft, and I had the privilege of flying a lot of them. But these guys were true heroes. I watched as one of them landed under horrible conditions. And they never got off the water, but they picked the guy up and they taxied back about 20 miles into their harbor. And he never would have made it without him. So I had nothing but the deepest respect for these people right there, and that's exactly why I put it in there, because they get very little credit for having done a tremendous job for years. So, at any rate, and to bring our flying boat up more or less to date, some of them are still in action today. These are Air Force, and I don't know whether the Air Force still has it. I doubt it, but the Coast Guard does. And these things have rescued many, many people from small boats out at sea. So I thought I'd throw in there to just update you a little bit about the outcome of some of these great ships like the Boeing 314 Clipper, which in my mind, as I said before, I still think is probably the prettiest aircraft I have ever had the privilege of seeing. So, at any rate, I tell you what I know about this, and hope it's been of interest to you, as it has been to me for all of these years. As you can tell, I love airplanes and everything about them. The worst ever airplane I ever flew in my entire life was a wonderful machine, as far as I'm concerned. And so it's all relative. But at any rate, so does anyone have any questions that I probably can't answer? Yes.
Well, two things. Franklin was 61 years old at the time of the meeting, one of his age.
Yeah.
And then secondly, why didn't they open up the Atlantic to that? They went to the Pacific, and it turned out to be obviously a profitable route.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that because I meant to cover that and did.
Can you repeat the question?
What's that?
Please repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Repeat the question. Why didn't they open up the Atlantic as they did the Pacific? There were two reasons. One was the Atlantic was a lot further without any stops in between, but mostly it's because think back in the flying instruments in those days. So you have to put yourself back in that time period. The weather, and this is what this is the one thing that all of the sources agreed with, because I wondered that same thing. the weather through the North Atlantic was so much worse than it was going through the mid-Pacific that they experimented with one and it went down in the water. They don't explain why, but it ended up in the water, and they ended up losing the aircraft. They got the crew out, a ship, and managed to get them out. But it was a much more difficult task because of the weather and the distances going Atlantic, because they didn't have all of these long midway stops type things. And that's why Pan Am had set those up, was because the distances were correct to get them over there. And that's why it went like this rather than a straight line. In the Atlantic, there was very little available, and what was usually socked in. And so that's why they were. Would they have ever done that? Probably would have if it hadn't been for the war. They would have resolved that issue, but not at that time. Any other question? Yeah.
Is there another name like the China Clipper besides Pan Am at that time?
Not that I know of. Everything that I found goes back to what I had learned when I was a little kid, which is it was called the China Clipper, and it was named, excuse me, of course, after the Clipper ships, the surface vessels. Why it picked up that name, I don't know, but it stuck right away, and I guess it's kind of a romantic name, and this was a romantic aircraft, so they put the two together. But as far as I know, that's the only name they ever went by. Yes.
Did they ever start flying down the South America?
Yes, they did. They were starting down there, but the information on flying down to South America ends up just like you turn the page and it's a blank page. I never found any information whatsoever other than the fact that they did start flying down there, but only right before the war, because you see, of course, when these went into service was shortly before Pearl Harbor was bombed. And so it kind of dwindled into open space as far as whatever came of those routes, but they never, as far as we know, they never developed into anything, and then it faded away to nothing. Another question?
On that previous slide, the two-engine airplane,
Yeah.
was that the Albatross?
Yes, it is. That one right there?
I have a short story about the Albatross. I flew with a guy at Continental who...
Yeah, you want to stand and give me
Yeah,
a story?
he was a medical doctor as well as a pilot, and we had hired him. And I always kind of hoped he was a better doctor than he was a pilot. And there was an Albatross that was a static display at Blackland Air Force Base for many years. And he bought that Albatross and retrofitted and got it flying. It was actually given type ratings, I think, at Lake Conroe, north of Houston, in the Albatross. I don't know whatever happened to the airplane. He ended up in Guam, flying for Continental out of Guam. Last I heard, because anyway, that's an Albatross story.
Yeah.
Not a good one, but it's one I have.
Well, in response to that, I will say that the last I heard, which is no less than a year old, Coast Guard's still flying these things. They're still using them, and they've pulled a lot of fishermen out of the water. A lot of them. They use choppers now, as well as when I go up there to the beach where I live, every year I will see 2 or 3 of these go by, and I know what they're doing. There's somebody stuck out in the water that needs to be picked up, and they're going out there to pick them up. And that's another thing, as long as I've opened up that can of worms there. I think that no group that I know of suffers more from proper pat on the back than the Coast Guard. I watch those guys, and I'll tell you, my hat's off to them all the time. Any other questions? If not, oh, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Gary's coming up to.
I gotta put in a commercial. Can I put in a
Wait,
commercial?
not yet.
Oh,
Do a commercial, go ahead.
No. Come on, Gary.
Okay. Just thing on to.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to say in the back of the room, there's a poster. Be sure to sign it for Blaine. Give your appreciation because he is our founder, one of our founders of Old Bull Pilots. And we want to, decided to present him with a special gift certificate that he and his wife could have lunch here. And this is all from you and from your donations. So I want to say thank you very much, Blaine, for your dedication and support for Old Bull Pilots. Thank you very much.
thank you, and I loved every minute of it. I do want to give a commercial. What is this, 29th? Tomorrow night at the Palm Canyon Theater is the opening of a 7-series run of The Music Man, which I'll be working on again tonight, and our quartet will be singing in that show. So if you care to join us down there, it's going to be an excellent show.
Well, thank you very much. Don't forget to sign the poster.
Marvelous airplane that did almost everything. I'll tell you a personal story that has nothing to do with the Boeing 314, but it does have to do with this. Right after Pearl Harbor was bombed, I was a senior in high school. It was the week after our final football game of the season. And it was a few days later, and I don't remember exactly where, but I do remember that it was a Sunday because I lived up near that school that I talked about. And a Japanese submarine, I didn't know what it was, so it came up the river. Not that far, it's about 6.5 miles, as there is from the mouth of the river there. And all of a sudden turned around, and how he ever navigated out of there submerged, I'll never know. But he disappeared out of there, and of course we couldn't see the periscope or anything that far away. Next thing I know, out of some point, here comes one of those things, and the story is that he waited till he got out of the mouth of the river, and then they got a whole ton of depth charges on it, and we never heard any more from either one. So I've always said that, we have all of these glamour aircraft, and I had the privilege of flying a lot of them. But these guys were true heroes. I watched as one of them landed under horrible conditions. And they never got off the water, but they picked the guy up and they taxied back about 20 miles into their harbor. And he never would have made it without him. So I had nothing but the deepest respect for these people right there, and that's exactly why I put it in there, because they get very little credit for having done a tremendous job for years. So, at any rate, and to bring our flying boat up more or less to date, some of them are still in action today. These are Air Force, and I don't know whether the Air Force still has them. I doubt it, but the Coast Guard does. And these things have rescued many, many people from small boats out at sea. So I thought I'd throw in there to just update you a little bit about the outcome of some of these great ships like the Boeing 314 Clipper, which in my mind, as I said before, I still think is probably the prettiest aircraft I have ever had the privilege of seeing. So, at any rate, I tell you what I know about this, and hope it's been of interest to you, as it has been to me for all of these years. As you can tell, I love airplanes and everything about them. the worst ever airplane I ever flew in my entire life was a wonderful machine, as far as I'm concerned. And so it's all relative. But at any rate, so does anyone have any questions that I probably can't answer? Yes.
Well, two things. Frank was 61 years old at the time of the meeting, one of his age.
Yeah.
And then secondly, why didn't they open up the Atlantic to that? They went to the Pacific, and it turned out to be obviously a profitable route.
Okay, I'm glad you asked that because I meant to cover that and did.
Can you repeat the question?
What's that?
Please repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Repeat the question. Why didn't they open up the Atlantic as they did the Pacific? There were two reasons. One was the Atlantic was a lot further without any stops in between. But mostly it's because, think back in the flying instruments in those days. So you have to put yourself back in that time period. The weather, and this is what this is the one thing that all of the sources agreed with, because I wondered that same thing. The weather through the North Atlantic was so much worse than it was going through the mid-Pacific that they experimented with one and it went down in the water. They don't explain why, but it ended up in the water, and they ended up losing the aircraft. They got the crew out, a ship, and managed to get them out. But it was a much more difficult task because of the weather and the distances going Atlantic, because they didn't have all of these long midway stops type things. And that's why Pan Am had set those up, was because the distances were correct to get them over there. And that's why it went like this rather than a straight line. In the Atlantic, there was very little available, and what was usually stocked in. And so that's why they were. Would they have ever done that? Probably would have if it hadn't been for the war. They would have resolved that issue, but not at that time. Any other question? Yeah.
Is there another name like the China Clipper besides Plan Am at that time?
Not that I know of. Everything that I found goes back to what I had learned when I was a little kid, which is it was called the China Clipper, and it was named, excuse me, of course, after the Clipper ships, the surface vessels. Why it picked up that name, I don't know, but it stuck right away, and I guess it's kind of a romantic name, and this was a romantic aircraft, so they put the two together. But as far as I know, that's the only name they ever went by. Yes?
Did they ever start flying down the South America?
Yes, they did. They were starting down there, but the information on flying down to South America ends up just like you turn the page and it's a blank page. I never found any information whatsoever other than the fact that they did start flying down there, but only right before the war, because you see, of course, when these went into service was shortly before Pearl Harbor was bombed. And so it kind of dwindled into open space as far as whatever came of the route, but they never, as far as we know, they never developed into anything, and then it faded away to nothing. Another question?
On that previous slide, the two-engine airplane,
Yeah.
was that the Albatross?
Yes, it is. That one right there?
I have a short story about the Albatross. I flew with a guy at Continental who...
Yeah, you want to stand and give me
Yeah,
the story?
he was a medical doctor as well as a pilot, and we had hired him. And I always kind of hoped he was a better doctor than he was a pilot. And there was an Albatross that was a static display at Blackland Air Force Base for many years. And he bought that Albatross and retrofitted and got it flying. It was actually given type ratings, I think, at Lake Conroe, north of Houston, in the Albatross. I don't know whatever happened to the airplane. He ended up in Guam
Well, in response to that, I will say that the last I heard, which is no less than a year old, Coast Guard's still flying these things, they're still using them, and they've pulled a lot of fishermen out of the water. A lot of them. They use choppers now, as well as when I go up there to the beach where I live, every year I will see 2 or 3 of these go by, and I know what they're doing. There's somebody stuck out in the water that needs to be picked up, and they're going out there to pick them up. And that's another thing, as long as I've opened up that can of worms there. I think that no group that I know of suffers more from proper pat on the back than the Coast Guard. I watch those guys and I tell you, my hat's off to them all the time. Any other questions? If not, oh, good.
Thank you very much, Board.